The air inside the shrine thickened, heavy with centuries of silence. Charles and Smith stood before the girl who called herself Memory, though her smile bore no trace of sorrow or wisdom, only certainty. The cracked wall behind her still glowed faintly, the name R, trembling on the edge of erasure. She stepped forward, barefoot on dust, her voice an eerie harmony of forgotten voices. Do you know what it feels like to be left behind? To be remembered only when it's convenient. Charles clenched his fists. You were the shrine. The stories. You held the truth. She nodded slowly. Yes. Until truth became too fragile. The coin offered me protection. A cleaner version of memory. One shaped, not suffered. Smith took a cautious step closer. But the coin doesn't preserve. It rewrites. It buried Robert. It tried to erase him completely. The girl looked at him with sympathy. Because Robert was unfinished. He lingered between sacrifice and shadow. But you too, you can be eternal. She lifted her hands, and suddenly, the air shimmered around them. They saw themselves, Charles standing tall in bronze statues across cities, Smith with books and schools named after him. Songs. Plays. Smiling children holding up golden tokens stamped with their faces, smiling wide, the same eternal grin. You'll be legends, she said gently. No more struggle to be remembered. No more sacrifice. Just legacy. Charles stepped back. That isn't a legacy. That's a lie. Her eyes narrowed. Isn't that what stories are? Smith shook his head. No. Stories are truth-wearing symbols. This is control wearing a smile. The girl's voice darkened. Refuse and you'll vanish. Not just from history. From everyone. Even each other. She held out 2 coins, black with gold smiles. Choose. Silence. Then Charles said, We already did. He turned to Smith, and without words they pressed their palms together. In Smith's hand, the broken cowrie. In Charles's, the wooden coin still carved with the smile. They crushed both. A blast of wind screamed through the shrine. The names on the wall ignited in flame, real flame, not illusion. Smoke rose in coils, revealing the true script beneath the smoothed stone. Names returned. Robert's name surged back into place, whole, bold, and burning. Robert. The girl staggered backward, cracks forming on her skin like porcelain. You fools, she whispered, her voice flickering. You've broken everything. She fell to her knees and turned to dust. But as the dust blew away, one last coin remained on the floor. No smile. No face. Just a mirror. And from it, Charles saw himself begin to fade. The mirror coin on the shrine floor shimmered with unnatural stillness. No smile. No sigil. Just a silver surface that showed Charles's reflection. And slowly, piece by piece, it was disappearing. First his eyes. Then his mouth. Then his name. Smith fell to his knees beside him. Charles. Talk to me. Charles tried to speak, but no sound came. He looked down at his hands. They were still there, but the air no longer responded to his presence. The dust didn't rise when he moved. His own shadow was missing. Smith grabbed the mirror coin. Immediately, the surface rippled, showing Smith's reflection too. Whole for now. But the whisper came instantly, cold and familiar. One stayed. One returned. One must be forgotten. Smith gritted his teeth. No. No more choices like this. We've already paid in blood and memory. The mirror pulsed. Balance demands forgetting. Charles looked into Smith's eyes, panicked. His form began to flicker, like a candle under breath. Then Smith did something desperate. He reached into his robe and drew out the oldest relic they had left, the tooth of the first betrayer. He held it above the mirror coin. Take this instead, he whispered. Take the origin, not the bond. The mirror screamed, a high-pitched screech that shattered every pebble in the shrine. The mirror's surface cracked. Charles dropped to the ground, coughing, his voice returning like gravel in his throat. I'm still here. But then they heard it, a voice rising from the cracks in the coin, soft and low. If you release me, the curse becomes story. But if you trap me again, it becomes memory. Smith stared at Charles. If we let it out, he said slowly, it turns into myth, something people talk about but don't believe. We win, but only in legend. Charles looked at the coin. And if we trap it, history remembers, Smith said. Truth survives, but will never escape its weight. Not in this life. Not in any. The cracked coin glowed with heat. Choose, the voice repeated. Charles took Smith's hand. Together, they pushed the tooth into the center of the mirror. And in a flash, everything turned white. No shrine. No coin. No sound. Just 3 names whispered into wind. Charles. Smith. Robert. And somewhere far away, the Iroko tree bloomed blood-red leaves. It was the season of return in Tasharana. The rains had passed, the millet fields stood tall, and the Iroko tree in the village square now bore wide red leaves, unnatural, beautiful, and never before seen. The villagers took it as a blessing. They painted their doors crimson. They hung gourds from the branches. A festival was declared, the Day of the 3 Roads. Smith and Charles stood quietly at the edge of the square, watching dancers twirl in patterned wrappers. Children chase each other with wooden tokens carved into spirals, and griots sing the tale of 3 brave men, the griot said, who chose 3 different roads, one for courage, one for wisdom, one for riches. Charles frowned. That's not how it happened. Smith exhaled. No, but it's how it's remembered. The griot continued. One never returned. One was honored. And one became the tree that watches over us all. The crowd clapped. Charles looked around. They don't know our names. Smith nodded. That's what happens when you put truth in the hands of time. A young boy approached them, barefoot, with a red leaf tucked behind one ear and a cowrie shell on a string around his neck. He stared at them. Are you the 2 from the story? Smith smiled faintly. What do you think? The boy tilted his head. I think you're the one who stayed, and the one who remembered. Then he opened his palm and showed them something that made Charles's breath catch. A coin, but not gold, not smiling, wooden, cracked, etched with 3 initials, C.S.R. Where did you get this? Charles asked, his voice tight. The boy shrugged. It was under the tree. I think it's meant for me. Smith and Charles exchanged a look. A new guardian? But the boy just smiled and ran off, coin bouncing in his hand. The festival continued. Music filled the air. Yet the Iroko tree rustled loudly, like it knew something more. Later that night, when all had gone quiet, Smith found a new carving etched deep into the trunk. The story lives, but the truth still waits. And just below it, barely visible, a 4th initial. B. The festival ended with laughter and wine-soaked songs, but the following morning, a chill swept across Tasharana, a wind that did not come from nature. At sunrise, a stranger stood at the edge of the village square. Tall, dressed in deep indigo robes embroidered with flame-colored thread. Around their neck hung an amulet carved from bone, and on their finger, a ring shaped like a coin cracked and whispering. They said nothing for hours, just stood under the Iroko tree, watching. By midday, whispers swirled. People called them a prophet. Others called them a curse. Smith approached first. You're far from your road, traveler. The stranger looked up, eyes like dried riverbeds. I was born on the road, and my name was stolen from every stone. But I am here to reclaim it. Charles joined him, sensing something familiar. You speak like one who remembers. The stranger gave a slow smile. Not remembers. Carries. I am the last descendant of the betrayer, the one who forged the first coin from bone and bond. I have come to finish what she began. Smith narrowed his eyes. What is it you want? The stranger raised their ring. To rewrite the story. This time with control. You bound the curse in truth. But truth fades. Stories grow. And I have come to plan a new one. They pulled from their satchel a scroll made of bark, and unrolled it. It bore a version of the legend twisted. In it, Robert was the traitor, Charles the coward, Smith the thief of memory, and at the center, a smiling coin, held aloft by a faceless figure bathed in gold. Smith's voice shook. You'll turn lies into lineage. The stranger calmly placed the scroll beneath the Iroko roots. I don't need to. The tree will do the rest. It only needs a seed. Charles stepped forward. We burned the coin. We broke the line. The stranger's tone hardened. But the blood remains. I am what was buried. And I will grow again. Just then, the Iroko rustled violently, its red leaves trembling. The roots split open slightly, and from within a tiny golden sprout emerged. As thunder rumbled across the clear sky, the stranger whispered, You cannot bury what you are still standing on. And the tree smiled. The red leaves of the Iroko tree whispered through the night like voices gossiping in an unseen tongue. Smith and Charles sat in silence beneath it, shaken by the stranger's arrival and the cursed scroll now buried at its roots. The golden sprout glowed faintly in the soil. Charles finally spoke. If this grows, it becomes the new story. The lie becomes legend. Smith looked toward the horizon. Then we need someone who remembers what came before story, before spin, before betrayal was even named. Charles turned to him. The griot without tongue? Smith nodded. He saw the first betrayal with his own eyes. He was there when the tooth was carved. They say he speaks with his hands and his scars. Legends said the griot lived far beyond Kano, in the sun-bleached ruins of an abandoned caravan city swallowed by sand. Zamfru, the place where songs go to die. It was said no voice dared rise there, not even wind. They traveled under starlight, avoiding roads where smiling coin tokens now paved stalls, market walls, even temple gates. The story was spreading fast, faster than fire, because it wore a smile. It took them 3 days to reach Zamfru. The city was a ghost. Empty stalls, collapsed mud domes, old skeletons of minarets reaching for a sky that had long since forgotten to listen. They found him where the sand met stone, wrapped in black cloth, face hidden, sitting before a cracked drum and a wall of soot. When they approached, he didn't move. Smith knelt. We need the truth. Before it dies again. Slowly, the griot raised his hands. He did not sign words, but memories. He placed his palms on the soot-covered wall and began painting, not with ink, but with touch. As his fingers dragged across it, shapes emerged in living charcoal. The first betrayer, the carving of the tooth, the gift turned curse, the coin offered to save a dying child, and the oath broken to save the self. Then a figure emerged, Robert, arms outstretched, becoming root, not rot, holding back the curse with his body. The tree rising from him. Finally, the griot traced a final shape, a fourth face no one had ever seen before. It was neither Robert, Smith, nor Charles. It was the stranger, with eyes of fire, and the same cracked coin ring. Charles touched the wall. They were there too? At the beginning, the griot nodded once, then raised 3 fingers and crushed one beneath his palm. One of them had betrayed the others. Charles stepped back, stunned. One of us invited the coin's return. And in the far distance, back in Tasharana, the Iroko tree split down the middle. Back in Tasharana, the Iroko tree stood split like a mouth in mid-scream. One half still bore red leaves. The other had gone dark, its bark blackened, its roots twitching like veins under skin. The villagers gathered in uneasy silence. At the center stood the stranger, descendant of the betrayer, arms outstretched, coin ring glinting, voice soft and venomous. This village has lived long in the shadow of stories, they said. Some were planted, some were born, Others were stolen. They paced slowly around the broken tree. But now a choice must be made. You all deserve to decide what story will feed your children, your names, your soil. The villagers looked to one another, unsure, murmuring. The stranger raised the cracked scroll and unrolled it again. Story 1, they said, tells of 3 broken boys drunk on gold and guilt. One dies. One hides. One survives to weep over a legacy of rot. A hush. Story 2, they continued, speaks of a brotherhood who defied a curse, planted memory, and bled to bind the truth into the bark. Smith and Charles, arriving from their journey, pushed through the crowd, dusty, exhausted, changed. Don't listen, Smith shouted. That coin they carry, it smiles because it knows how easy it is to be believed. The stranger turned slowly. Malam Smith, are you certain you remember it correctly? Smith froze. A tremor pulsed behind his eyes. Suddenly, the tree looked unfamiliar. Had it always been this wide? Was it truly Robert who fed its roots? Or was that a dream passed down so often it became a lie? Charles grabbed his arm. Don't let them in. That's how it spreads, through doubt. The stranger smiled. Then let the people decide. They raised both hands. Behind them, 2 masks appeared. One red, weeping, one gold, grinning. Each household will vote, the stranger said, by choosing a mask. Red for sorrow. Gold for joy. The story with more believers becomes history. Charles stepped forward. You don't get to rewrite memory just because it hurts. The stranger turned to the villagers. Then choose your pain wisely. That night, the masks were distributed. Each home, each family, 1 vote. And as Smith sat by candlelight, staring at the red mask in his hand, he whispered to himself, but what if I was the one who led us to the gold? As the candles burned low, Smith's reflection in the window wore the gold mask instead. And the whisper returned. The story that wins rewrites the man. The village of Tasher Rana slept uneasily. Red masks and gold masks hung outside every home, fluttering like spirits caught in debate. The stranger watched from the split Iroko, silent and still, as if knowing history itself held its breath. Inside Charles's hut, Smith stared at the red mask on the floor. He hadn't hung it. Not yet. His hands trembled. His thoughts were no longer only his own. What if the gold path had saved more lives? What if guilt was heavier than truth? Charles lay restless nearby, muttering in his sleep. And then his breathing stopped. A sudden stillness. Then, he sat up, but not fully awake. The room shimmered. And beside him, standing in the glow of the dying fire, was Robert. Not shadow. Not echo. But Robert as he once was, tall, weary, with eyes filled with sorrow and something else, finality. Charles didn't speak. His throat locked. Robert placed a hand on his shoulder. You can still protect it, he said, voice faint. But not with words. With roots. He held out a seed, small, dry, glowing from within. This is memory unspoken. If planted in truth, the Iroko will remember on its own. No vote. No mask. Just what was. Charles hesitated. But what's the cost? Robert's expression didn't change. The tree can only remember one version. And for that, one must be forgotten completely. Charles's mouth dried. You mean? Robert nodded. One of us must vanish. Our names. Our actions. Our shadow. Even if we were brothers? Robert's voice cracked. Especially then. Charles fell to his knees, the weight of choice heavy in his chest. Will it be me or you? He whispered. Robert stepped back into the shadows. You already know the answer. The hut faded. The fire dimmed. Charles woke, gasping, alone. But in his hand was the seed. Smith stirred, rubbing his eyes. You okay? Charles stared at him, eyes hollow. I have to plant it. Smith frowned. What? What seed? Charles slowly stood. The one that will make them remember everything. But only one of us will be remembered when it grows. Outside, the first rooster crowed, and the villagers stepped from their homes, lifting their eyes to the tree, unaware that by sunset, one name would be erased. Forever. By midday, Tasharana was silent again. Every house had cast its vote. Red masks for sorrow, gold for joy. They hung like dried leaves outside doors, swaying in the wind as if the village itself couldn't decide whether to mourn or dance. Charles walked alone to the Iroko tree, the seed clutched in his palm, pulsing with warmth. Smith followed, eyes heavy, his soul pulled taut with unspoken fears. The stranger stood at the base of the split trunk, arms raised as if conducting fate. "Your village has chosen," they said. "The tally is done." Behind them, two children, one holding the red mask, the other the gold, approached the tree. As they pressed the masks to the roots, the Iroko shuddered. The gold mask sank in. The red crumbled into dust. The stranger smiled wide. "And so the people have spoken. The story of light, of legend, of a smiling coin becomes truth." But then, Charles stepped forward. He knelt by the root, placed the glowing seed in the center, and whispered Robert's name. "Robert, this is for you." He pressed it into the soil. The wind stopped. The birds fell quiet. The Iroko pulsed with red fire, and then everything changed. The smiling mask was rejected. It blackened, cracked, and was expelled from the roots. A massive gust of wind surged from the tree, knocking the stranger to their knees. The tree glowed from within. Then it began to reform. The split healed. The leaves turned deep green. And from its bark names emerged. R. C. S. And finally, B. The betrayer. The villagers gasped. The forgotten story returned to their hearts, not by vote, but by truth. But then Charles turned to Smith, tears in his eyes. "You remember me, don't you?" Smith stared, blinking, then frowning. "Who are you?" Charles stepped back. His outline flickered. The price had been paid. Robert would be remembered. But Charles would be the one sacrificed to time. Cliffhanger, final beat. As the Iroko's roots pulsed one last time, Smith touched the bark, tracing the initials. R. S. He whispered to no one. There was another, wasn't there? But the wind said nothing. Only the tree knew now. And it would not speak.